podcast where we watch and discuss a year of film history every week, starting from 1895. This week is 1901. I am one of your hosts, Chris Ellie, a film projectionist, and joining me as always is...
I am your other host, Glen Covell. I am a filmmaker and film nerd in general.
What's our beginning banter? I feel like we should start out with banter every time, you know what I'm saying?
Sure, banter is always good.
How you doing, Glenn?
I'm fine, you know. I'm as to be expected, given the state of the world. But in general, I'm pretty good. I'm fairly comfortable, which I'm happy to say.
I'm chilling as well. I'm about to go see Rocky Horror to Drive-In next weekend. Or not next weekend, tomorrow. Yeah, should be fun.
Yeah, that will be very fun.
And now you made this podcast explicit again.
What? What'd I say?
You said, oh, shit.
That's not explicit. Everyone hears shit all the time.
That's true, but I had a bunch of pages open on Google of all of these podcasting people going like, what qualifies as explicit, you know? And
I don't think I've done very few swears, haven't I?
Just one. Yeah. On the previous episode.
Oh, whoops! I didn't even catch it. I thought I would make a big deal out of it whenever it happened,
fine.
but I guess I just slipped out.
It was another shit. It's
okay.
not
well,
you could say that on cable, you know.
Exactly.
But yeah, there were all these people going like, "Oh, Apple." They crawl through it, and if they hear something, they'll cut your podcast off, and if you mislabel it, you'll never be on the iTunes store again.
Oh,
you
boy.
know?
Yikes.
So that kind of scared me into just marking that episode as explicit. You know, not a big deal.
Well, I guess that just gives me free reign now, if it's going to be marked as explicit anyway.
The gloves are off. Well, I was doing individual episodes, but
yeah.
For on a per episode basis, the gloves are off.
I'm still surprised at how foul-mouthed I've been on this podcast. I feel like my general just vernacular is usually much filthier.
Well, now you can get as filthy as you want on this one.
Oh, shit. Oh, piss.
That's a good one. That one's a pretty scary swear, though.
Yeah.
All right. Well, as we're starting out, we like to give ourselves a little context for the films that we're about to watch with the news from the year 1901. Take it away, Glenn.
The news of the year 1901. The British colonies across Australia unite to form one country, the Commonwealth of Australia. The Colorado cannibal, Alfred Packer, is released from prison. Great Britain. Queen Victoria has died after 63 years on the throne. The Brits welcome their new king, Edward VII. J.P. Morgan conducts the first billion-dollar business deal for industrial steel, the first corporation of such wealth. The Boxer Rebellion ends with the Boxer Protocol Treaty. Panic of 1901. The New York Stock Exchange crashes for the first time. A strange patent is filed, an automatic sweeping machine known as a vacuum cleaner. Emily Hobhouse brings attention to the tens of thousands of women and children dying in British-run concentration camps in South Africa as the Boer War rages on. William Mckinley is sworn in for his second term. 6 months later, he is assassinated by anarchist Leon Czolgosz and replaced by Theodore Roosevelt. The first Nobel Prize ceremony is held in Stockholm. Old Annie Edison Taylor rides over Niagara Falls in a barrel. She is the first to ever survive the feat.
And that's the news.
Thank you, Glenn.
A couple real downers in there.
Yeah. Oh man, I put that flamethrower one in there specifically because I thought you'd have fun saying Klein Flammenwerfer.
No, that too much. Also, this isn't for Elon Musk.
Well, as we often do, let's start out with George Méliès. The French.
The French. Orson Welles reference. Yeah, he's crushing it yet again. Got some good stuff. I mean, in addition, he's still doing a lot of short stuff. I think I watched all of his films from this year, but I might have skipped a few that were just like very kind of slight.
He's got some slight trick films.
Yeah, but he's got some fancier, more kind of impressive trick films also. I guess the big one being The Man with the Rubber Head.
Yeah.
Which is a great title.
It is. Not the original title, it's the American title. But,
right, yeah. We're usually referring to the American, or at least translated into English titles of these movies.
Yeah. Though sometimes it's fun to just bust out the French. I like to give that to you.
Oui.
So, this is Méliès discovering yet another effect, and using it to, I don't know.
To great silliness.
It is pretty silly. And this is an effect that, he kind of pioneered with this one, and then there were a couple other movies where I think refined it, and then a couple other people started using this new effect that he discovered later this year.
Everyone's copying George Méliès, all the time. Always,
yep. Anyway, this movie, The Man with the Rubber Head, the effect that we're talking about will become evident. Basically, the story of the movie is that there is some alchemist-type guy, as usual in a Méliès movie, and he picks up a living head that is his own head.
Just lying around.
Yeah, it's a copy of his own head that's lying around. He puts it on a table that has a little pike in the middle of it, or a hose, and he takes, what do you call it? The
bellows.
Yeah, he takes some bellows and blows up the head, and the head starts expanding and expanding until it fills up almost the entire frame, and then he lets the air back out again, and the head is huge. It's kind of like doing its classic Méliès jabbering all around kind of motion, and then he brings some other guy in. He's like, hey, check this thing out, and the other guy uses the bellows a little too hard and explodes the head.
Yeah.
And so the effect that's happening here is that within the double exposure that he is normally doing, he is zooming in, like way in, and making it appear that on one exposure the head is filling up just the whole frame, but on the other exposure the head is sitting inside of the laboratory, and so it looks like the head, as he zooms in and out, is getting bigger and smaller.
Although I think, to be a film nerd and very pedantic, I don't think it's actually zooming. I think it's physically moving the camera closer.
You are correct. Yes.
Which is a small detail, but me being a nerd, I need to point it out. But it works very well. Like, it's not something. It certainly requires like most of these double exposure effects or multiple exposures, it definitely requires a lot of coordination to get right.
Yeah,
and he gets it. He nails it. Like, he's very precise with it. Like, it's not, the head isn't like moving around a bunch as it's getting blown up. It really reads as it's intended to, which is it's staying in one place, but it's just getting bigger.
Yeah. Watching this made me think that there must be so much Méliès test footage as he's developing these effects, that was just never released. I mean, most of his movies don't exist anymore, but imagine all of the kind of interesting playing around that he was doing to try and figure out these effects.
Yeah, that's something. It's funny. I'd never really given a lot of thought to that, and it's very true, because it's like anytime he introduces a new effect or anything like that, he does it with such precision that he's clearly practiced it. And I think there's even bits of like interviews he's given later in life where he talks about how he had to just throw out like hundreds of feet of film because he had to perfect all the effects. He had to kind of shoot things and reshoot things until they were perfect.
Yeah, and a lot of this action is so precise too, especially because it requires synchronizing multiple takes together with each other.
Yeah.
There was in the movie Hugo, which is most people's frame of reference for George Méliès, I think.
Yeah.
I was rewatching some of the scenes of him shooting movies, and they actually showed like a metronome in the studio that they were using to help them time everything. And I don't know how necessarily accurate that was, but it seems to make sense for what they were doing, especially since it's silent. You can make all the kind of noise you want, and the metronome probably would have helped a lot for this synchronization they were doing.
Yeah, I would definitely think that he'd be using some kind of, if not a metronome, a stopwatch or something. He would be timing stuff pretty precisely, in order to get it to all work. But yeah, I'm wondering if that is like a historical, like a historical fact that he used a metronome, or if that was just Scorsese kind of taking a stab.
There were a couple. And once he discovered this effect with The Man with the Rubber Head, there were at least two other surviving movies from that year where he used that effect. Both of which I actually thought were a lot smoother than Man with the Rubber Head. There was The Devil and the Statue and The Dwarf and the Giant. The Dwarf and the Giant is two copies of Méliès, and one's getting really small and the other one's getting really big. And one of the cool things about it is that like the big copy of him breaks open a pillow or something and then sprinkles a bunch of feathers on the small one, and it makes the effect. It really sells the effect well. And then The Devil and the Statue. The devil, like, there's a part where the devil just kind of gets all threatening and everything, and so he gets big and he starts expanding and filling up like this whole space and like towering over this other person, which I thought was a really good use of the effect, rather than for just kind of trick film silliness. It was almost like this, oh my god, it felt very imposing.
Yeah, for sure. Kind of a funny thing about Man with the Rubber Head, I thought, was how, like, kind of like we were talking about before, how close-ups at this point are kind of treated as an effect or trick in and of themselves.
So weird.
And this kind of feels a piece with that, where, like, just the mere fact that we're seeing someone's head kind of filling most of the screen is like, whoa, a face that's really close.
Yeah.
And I think it is one of the first times that Méliès we've ever really like gotten a good kind of, this isn't really a close-up technically, but it's kind of the closest we've gotten to one in a Méliès movie.
Yeah. Yeah, he a lot of his shots, I mean, basically all of his shots are very pulled back, very, very locked off and theatrical. Yeah. And a lot of the more funky camera stuff that he's doing is for the sake of effects rather than for the sake of new angles, I think.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much the only real angle he ever does is kind of this straightforward, like, as if you're watching something on stage, as if you're sitting in a theater, watching something kind of happening in front of you, which has the benefit of kind of showing off a lot of his choreography and kind of, I guess, just stage theatrical skills.
Because some of the effects are stage style effects.
But it does, like, we're starting to see a little bit of like more experimentation with other camera angles from other people, and so that's the one place where I feel like Méliès isn't really kind of pushing the boundaries.
Yeah. I mean, I'm all about Méliès. He's wonderful, and I think next year we're going to be seeing his biggest and most famous thing ever. But I feel like this was almost a year, besides this one effect, where other people started overtaking Méliès in certain ways. Mm-hmm. We'll get to that, I suppose.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it's kind of funny that the most interesting Méliès movie, or the one that seems the most interesting to me, is one which is lost, which is his Red Riding Hood movie, which I read about, but is, it theoretically no longer exists unless some print of it is locked away somewhere, hidden from the world.
It could be, with the way that a lot of these films are getting discovered even 10 years ago or so.
Yeah. But I mean, for the last few years, Méliès has been doing at least one kind of big multi-scene sort of extravaganza film, like Cinderella or Joan of Arc. And this year he had two, but one of them was Red Riding Hood, and so it's lost. And that one had, according to Méliès, had 12 scenes, but he tended to kind of oversell how many scenes were in his movies. Tableaus, as he described them, and it was usually
cut it in half or so.
Yeah, usually kind of he would fudge it a lot. So it probably wasn't actually 12, but I think some of these other ones are around 6 a lot of the time.
Yeah, Wikipedia said that Red Riding Hood was it didn't describe the length of the movie, but it described the length of the film. And so I went into some film length to time calculator on the internet. And it's like 5 minutes and 40 seconds or so out of the, I think, 160 meters of film that it is.
Yeah. But it sounds like a really entertaining movie because by the description of it, George Méliès kind of rewrote a lot of the story to add a lot more comedy. And changed the whole ending to where the wolf is chased and killed by the town and then roasted over a spit at like a big festival while everyone dances and presumably eats the wolf.
Oh, wow. You're not supposed to eat carnivores.
Also, I think it was on Wikipedia, claimed that Edison stole it and claimed it was an original film because there were no international copyright laws at the time. So
how is Edison this slimy? I don't understand.
Apparently it was legal because it was a French film and there was no international copyright, so he could just take it and just say that he made it. But it does definitely reflect poorly on Edison. Not that we really hold Edison in very high regard, I don't think.
He of whipping bears and unimaginative films.
Yeah. Méliès' other big movie from this year was Bluebeard, which I initially thought was a pirate movie. I would have figured that it was a pirate movie with a name like that. Because I don't know about you, but I have never heard of Bluebeard before. I had heard of Bluebeard, but I didn't really know the story.
Okay, yeah, because Bluebeard, Cinderella, and Red Riding Hood are all adaptations of Charles Perrault fairy tales, some of which were changed into Grimm fairy tales or adapted into Grimm fairy tales. But I think this Bluebeard one seemed to be stay more in France, and he did these in like the 1700s or something like that. So yeah, I'd basically never heard of Bluebeard, and so I had to. I think it's interesting, these. I might have mentioned it when we talked about Cinderella, but these fairy tale adaptations, the benefit of doing them is that with a silent medium where you're not taking in a huge amount of story information from the film itself, having an idea of what the story is supposed to be is really helpful. And so these fairy tale adaptations, because they're folk tales, they're well known, that kind of does a lot of the heavy lifting in a lot of the storytelling case. But it's interesting that for Bluebeard, like I didn't try to watch it without reading a summary first, but that summary helped me a lot.
Yeah. Same here. I knew the name Bluebeard, but I didn't really know the plot. Which even just that I was kind of surprised by, like how many things that I know are clearly kind of like inspired by Bluebeard.
How would you say?
I mean, Beauty and the Beast was the first one I thought of. The whole kind of like woman goes into a castle with a spooky guy and is instructed not to go into a single room because there's secrets in there. Not that he says that that's the reason. But I thought, that's also a French fairy tale. I looked it up, and that does come later. I think Bluebeard dates back, I think even before the 1700s. I think more like the 15 or 1600s. Whereas Beauty and the Beast is a little bit, I think is 17 something.
Yeah, I think Charles Perrault, he kind of amassed folk tales into commonly understood tellings.
Yeah,
is how I understand it. And then the Grimm brothers, the Brothers Grimm, also, I don't know.
We'll get to that movie eventually.
They did a similar thing, and I think some of what they did was working off Charles Perrault, and some of it was just collating from other sources. But a lot of places credit Charles Perrault, France. I can
tell you right now, there's no hard T in that name.
There are there any hard T's in French at all?
Yes.
Oh, I know there are.
But,
yes, because the utmost curse word in Montreal French is tabernacle.
Is it?
It is, as far as I've heard. As in tabernacle. It's a kind of Christ-related thing.
Oh.
Anyway, Bluebeard.
Yeah, spooky movie. Very macabre.
Yeah.
As I would say Méliès' way.
I would say, though, that this is... So, there's a scene in this movie. The basic idea is that there is a rich... I don't know what you would call him. Guy.
A lord.
A lord. That works.
Yeah.
There's a rich lord who is trying to get a wife from some of the other people and showing off his money and everything like that.
With a big bag with, like, not dollar signs on it, but just, like, a big, like, it has, like, 100,000 written on it or something like that.
Yeah, 1,000, 1,000,000.
Yeah.
And so one guy gives his daughter to Bluebeard, and she's not about it, definitely. And he takes her home, and then basically immediately tells her, like, hey, babe, I'm going out. Here's a big key. Don't open the door with this big key. And
a flawless plan.
Which almost, like, I guess I'm commenting on the fairy tale itself, but it has some, like, Adam and Eve vibes with the, like, telling the woman, like, don't do this.
The forbidden
and then, like,
thing.
Yeah. Although, rather than the kind of moralizing of the Adam and Eve story, I think that the story here is basically like, yeah, you were right to go in that room and check out this creepazoid's secrets.
Yeah.
Because she goes in the room. I should say that there is an imp who tells her to go in the room, played by George Méliès, because, of course.
Méliès gonna Méliès.
What is it? I saw a description of... Yes, It said, the description said, her curiosity manifests itself in the form of an imp who taunts and mocks her with potential promises that the room might contain. Which, he can't resist.
That's literally what I have written in my notes, is Méliès can't resist adding an imp to this movie.
I love that it used the word imp, too.
It's such a, like, spooky, creepy story already, and Méliès is like, no, we will have an imp. I will play
It must be silly.
I will play the imp. I will dance around in with little wings. He's the best.
But He's wonderful. And all of his imps have these like really long like antennae kind of, and
I think they're horns, aren't they?
I guess they're supposed to be horns, but they look like antenna because they're so big and floppy, you know.
Yeah.
The devil in the Statue also had similar horns. But anyway, she goes in the room, and after that silliness is over, there's some like really like horrific stuff in the room. It's the guy's 7 previous hanged wives, and they're all just hanging there on nooses.
Yeah.
It's wild.
Which is, that is as grim as that is. That's a step down from, I think, in the fairy tale they're on meat hooks.
Oh wow.
Which I guess Méliès wasn't quite willing to go that far with it. He was no Toby Hooper.
That scene, I would say, is one of the more genuinely horrific things that I've seen so far.
Yeah.
There's a lot of spooky stuff, but it's spooky and Halloween-y. It's not horror.
It's not actually disturbing. Yeah. Whereas this is just an unsettling sight. It also is kind of notable, I guess, in that when she first walks into the room, we transition to the set where all the wives are hanging, but it's dark, and then she opens the curtains and the light reveals the bodies hanging, which, as far as I can tell, is the first time that lighting has there's been kind of a lighting reveal of like the lighting in the scene changes to reveal something. Oh,
yeah, unless you count the lighting in the scene darkening to reveal Santa Claus in that Santa Claus movie. But I don't think that counts.
Not really, no.
Yeah. That's more of a practical concern than a storytelling
And this is
one.
like, I don't think the light on set changed. I think they just were underexposing the film and then they exposed it properly, so it appeared to kind of brighten the room. But that kind of stuck out to me as like a further innovation, I suppose.
Yeah, and so she sees the wives, and I guess what happens next? She kind of goes to sleep in her bed and dreams.
She drops the key, the big key.
Right.
And I only know this because I read the description of the story. She drops the key, and so it gets blood on it, and then tries to wash the blood off, and it won't come off.
Right, and he catches her while she's washing the blood off. There's some scene, I forget actually what order it goes in, if it's before he catches her or after. But she goes to sleep and she's dreaming, and she has this dream. It must be before he catches her.
I think so.
She has this dream where she sees all of the really spooky ghost wives, and they are moving up through the frame in a very in the double exposed fashion. But there's something kind of freaky and Dementor like about it.
Yeah.
And then there was another part during the dream, actually, which I could tell was double exposure trickery, but I couldn't quite tell how it was done, because it had a bunch of the keys it had a bunch of keys like dancing in the dream and taunting her.
Another
right?
Méliès thing that you can't resist doing is like dancing objects.
But they were just keys of multiple big sizes floating in the darkness.
Yeah.
And I couldn't quite tell how he did it, actually, because they were all moving at different rates and they were all different sizes. And normally if he's doing an exposure thing like that, they would kind of have to be more synchronized.
I think he probably made a bunch of big key props and had them on strings and kind of dangled them all in front of a black background. And then
that could explain
shot that after, so all the keys kind of... I think all the keys they're a single exposure. He filmed all the keys at once against the black background.
He filmed the keys against the key?
Yeah, that's how I'm guessing he did it, yeah.
And so it ends with him catching her, trying to wash the blood off the key, realizing that she went into the dead wife room, and then said, "I'm going to make you one of the dead wives now." But then right at the end, some people burst through and rescue her. and stab him.
Yeah, they stab him. They like pin him against a wall with a sword, Predator style, which was kind of fun. And then, in sort of, I think, kind of changes the ending of the fairy tale to be a bit happier, where not only does the Bluebeard's new wife survive not getting murdered, but then all of the old wives kind of come back to life and go off with all the dudes who busted in to kill Bluebeard. And so everyone gets a happy ending, even all the formerly dead ghost wives.
Retribution in the end. Did you have any more Méliès you wanted to talk about, or should we move on to Ferdinand Zecca?
I think we should move on to Ferdinand Zecca, because he's doing some interesting stuff.
Indeed, yeah. He actually did, like... I think... I actually can't determine at what point in the year 1901 he made any of these movies, but some of the ones that he made were very simple this year, and some were very complex and very interesting.
Yeah.
And this guy is kind of new to the scene. I think he first started in 1899 or 1900 or so, and this is actually, to me, a year where I noticed that a lot of new people were coming out of the woodwork.
Yeah. A lot of new people were coming out, and a couple of people really didn't do, that we've been talking about a lot, didn't do a whole lot. I mean, Elise Guy, I couldn't find any movies that she had directed that came out in 1901.
Yeah, and Lumiere's are kind of somewhat off the radar at this point. I mean, I think they're probably still making some. Actually, I did watch a actuality or two that they made, but it wasn't anything significant.
Yeah.
The significant Lumiere stuff, which I guess I can just mention right now, is that they made a 360-degree still camera, and there are a few panoramas online of just the 360-degree views that they captured, which were intended to be kind of projected in a big, wide arena type situation.
Cool.
But that's not movies.
Yeah.
So this guy, Ferdinand Zecca, he did this movie called What Is Seen Through a Keyhole, which
we talked about a little bit a few weeks ago.
Yeah. I don't remember if I left that in the podcast or not. But,
oh, okay. Well, we talked about it either way.
Yeah.
This movie is very often mislabeled as a film from, 1898? 1899?
7, I think.
Oh, dang.
Yeah.
Which, it makes a lot more sense when watched in its proper context.
Yeah. When you watched it, you were pretty shocked under the wrong title.
Right. Because it has edits in it. It has, like, different sort of... It's not that impressive of a movie for 1901, but if it had come out in 1897, it would have been incredible.
Yeah, I mean, although it would have been an impressive movie for 1900 even, because last year was when we got the grandma looking glass movie where these close-up point of view shots were basically invented.
Yeah.
And this is kind of just a series of them.
Yeah. It kind of feels like kind of the next step up from the Seen Through the Telescope film.
Yeah, it's much better narrative contextualization of what you're looking at.
Yeah.
I mean, it's complete contextualization rather than a lot of the contextless stuff that was happening with the George Albert Smith movies last year.
I mean, it is maybe the first use of a like POV shot through a keyhole, which is a pretty common thing.
Yep, and it's got a keyhole-shaped mat.
Exactly what you'd expect. And much like As Seen Through the Telescope, it is about a perv who goes around looking at people through things. In this case, a hotel clerk, I guess, or a guy who works at a hotel.
He's like a cleaner. He's got a little brushy thing.
Yeah. Going in and peeking in people's keyholes in their hotel rooms and seeing kind of different scenes play out in each one.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end, he gets beat up by a Willy Wonka-looking dude.
Yeah, he's trying to look in the last one, and
Yeah.
the guy opens the door at the same time, realizes that he's a creepo, and
Yeah.
then thrashes him.
So the movie at least gives him his comeuppance for being a creepo.
That's true, yeah. I feel this is another common aspect that I've noticed of movies from this year in particular, but movies up from this time in general, is that the way that a lot of them end is that somebody gets a thrashing.
Yes.
You know?
No, yeah, that is a very common thing. Both for this year and the last several years. There's been a lot of movies that are sort of a couple little jokes and things, but they just end with someone just getting the shit kicked out of them. Which is very, I mean, I see why it's very enjoyable, and it's very sort of climactic.
It's very visual.
Yeah, it's a very climactic way to end one of these little short films. It is often very funny, though.
Yeah, it seems natural, I guess, because a lot of these are also about scamps causing shenanigans.
Yeah, there's a lot of mischief happening.
Yeah, and it's like, how do you end that
Yeah.
in a sort of poetic justice way?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Or just justice in general, without that. Another notable thing about this movie, so the four rooms, the first room is a pretty lady that's putting on, or what's she doing? She's just kind of, she's like dressing, I think, or putting on makeup, and the guy's like, ooh. And the second one is a guy in drag, which is new.
Wait, was it?
Yeah.
I don't think I even picked up on that.
Yeah, no. It is a guy. It's what looks like a lady, and you think it's just, he's looking at ladies, and then he takes out his boobs, and he takes out his or her, I guess, is drag queen, right? Or trans. I don't even know. She takes out her boobs and then takes her wig off, and it's like a bald head underneath the wig. And then he he pulls back, it cuts back to him, and he looks at the camera like, whoa, what was that? You know? Which, yeah, this is like, I mean, it's the first, like, gay joke I've seen, you know?
Yeah. I didn't rewatch
sense.
this for this week, so that I don't remember it that well. But I don't remember picking up on that when I watched it a few weeks ago either. So I guess I guess I just wasn't paying very much attention.
It goes by quick. The third scene is two people eating or drinking champagne or whatever, and then the last one is the guy in the top hat that is mean to him.
Gives him a thrashing.
Yeah. What did you watch? Any other Zecca movies?
Yeah, I watched a few. There was one that I think I didn't watch until you pointed out to me. The drama at the bottom of the sea.
Yeah, it's a fun one.
That is a fun one. It reminded me a lot of an earlier Méliès film. The one the diver is going to the shipwreck.
On the Maine. The shipwreck on the Maine, yeah.
And this is a little bit less, I think, sort of technically impressive in that it doesn't have, like, the fish tank in front of the camera to give, like, live fish added to the scene. But it's still kind of some people pantomiming being underwater, which is always fun to watch. And then one of them finds treasure amongst a bunch of corpses, and they have an axe fight underwater, and one of them gets his air hose cut, and the other one steals the treasure.
Yeah, I remember. I saw the axe the hose get cut with the axe, and I was like, "Dang, you weren't kidding about this drama thing." Yeah. My goodness. History of a Crime. History of a Crime
was quite good, and very notable, I thought.
Yeah, I would say so too. There were a couple of 5-minute or so movies that came from the French and English. Just the French and English. And they seemed modern in their editing, honestly. And shot choices and everything like that. There's so much complexity going on in this movie.
Yeah, this one in particular is much more kind of narratively ambitious than... I don't want to say everything we've watched up to this point, but it's definitely one of the most kind of narratively complex movies that we've seen. I'm pretty sure it's the first film that we've watched anyway that kind of uses the medium of film to show memories, to kind of create a flashback, even though it's done in a kind of unconventional way, maybe.
A faux diegetic flashback.
Yeah. For the listener, the plot of the movie is we see a guy sleeping in bed and a burglar comes in, murders him, and breaks into his safe and takes all of his money. And then we see that same burglar kind of living the high life, and he gets arrested and taken away and thrown into the big house, into the jail. And whilst in jail, sort of one wall of the room he's in becomes a kind of second screen, and we see flashbacks to him sort of having a happy, kind of contented home life as a carpenter, who then... I didn't really get this by watching it, but apparently the intention is we're kind of seeing his descent into alcoholism, and he's going to the bar and he's doesn't want to leave. That part of it doesn't come across that clearly, but it's attempting to show his descent into a life of crime a bit.
Yeah.
And then we see him taken to the guillotine and beheaded in a pretty.
Yeah.
They pretty much, I mean, it's an effect, but it's a pretty, just wide shot of a guy getting thrown to a guillotine and beheaded.
It's pretty prompt, too. It's like they walk him up to it, put it down on him, and then his head rolls, and then it's over.
Yeah.
Very, very quickly.
The reveal of the guillotine is pretty great, though, because we kind of see him getting brought up to these two giant doors flanked by guards.
Yeah.
And then the doors open, revealing a guillotine sort of in the background behind them.
Although it does look like a kind of Wile E. Coyote fake tunnel.
Yes,
because
it is. Yeah. But it's still like a dramatic, cool visual. Like it's a very well composed shot.
Yeah, yeah. And it's like pretty emotionally engaging too, right?
Yeah.
Like at the beginning of this movie, you're upset with this guy because he killed somebody.
He stabs a guy in his bed.
Yeah. And then the movie invites you in to empathize with him.
Yeah.
Is the whole idea of the flashback, I think.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So you are trying to see things from his perspective, and you're seeing his memories, and you're seeing his justifications, and then he dies.
Yeah.
And that's the end of the movie.
Yeah, pretty grim and dramatic, but very good.
Yeah.
Like, well done, Ferdinand Zecca. You're really attempting to kind of... I think, this asks a lot more from the audience than most other films from this time. Most of them are very much just like, look at a silly thing happen, or look at a kind of spooky thing happen. Mm-hmm. Whereas this is really kind of taking you on a journey a bit.
Yeah, yeah. And that's what I'm saying. I mean, I guess after this we can move on to some Robert W. Paul / Walter R. Booth films.
The Englishman.
Yeah, because they were doing some similarly narratively ambitious stuff. Mm-hmm. Did you have anything else to say about this one?
Nope, I don't think so. I think we've back covered it.
Well, so another one that they did was a Christmas Story adaptation, which was called Scrooge or Marley's Ghost.
Right. Walter R. Booth, right?
Yeah, it seems like Walter R. Booth and Robert W. Paul were kind of working together on a lot of stuff.
Right. I think Robert W. Paul produced this one.
Yeah, I believe so.
Walter R. Booth, it should be noted, also directed The Human Flies, which I was not fond of when we covered it, however many weeks ago that was.
He's advanced a lot. I think
he really has. I really think he's coming to his own after The Human Flies. He's really learned a lot, probably from Robert W. Paul, who's been doing pretty consistently good stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I remember back in 1896, back when I was living in 1896, Robert W. Paul was making some Actualities that were kind of well known for their compositional beauty, I think. So yeah, he's been on the scene for a while now. At this point, 5 years or so.
Yeah.
So this is a adaptation of the Ghosts of Past, Present, and Future bit of...
You mean A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens.
Oh, did I say Christmas Story?
You did say Christmas Story earlier, but also the past, present, and future ghosts whole thing, otherwise known as A Christmas Carol.
That's not the whole thing, though.
No, but I mean,
right?
that's the gist of it. Like, yeah, it's A Christmas Carol. It's about Scrooge seeing a bunch of ghosts, or in this case, a single ghost.
Yeah, right. They had to reduce it somewhat to be 5 minutes long.
I think it was originally about 6 minutes, but only about 3.5 are surviving. At least the one that I watched.
The very beginning seems to be a little abridged, maybe. But this movie has a lot of well thought out cuts in it. I think similar to the Zecca movie. I mean, I guess it's about a bad man, right?
True. Although he does get redeemed.
Right. God bless us, everyone. Which it says on a sign somewhere. But yeah, there's like there are scenes where like he is outside of a house and then he walks up to the door and he goes in the door and then it cuts to the inside of the house, which is wild.
It's crazy that is wild for this time period, that like just that simple of a cut is like, whoa.
Yeah.
But it's true. This movie also had, at least the one that I watched, had wipes in it, which seems like a big deal. I guess those are original.
This is, as far as I could see, the first movie with wipe transitions, and it's bottom to top.
Yeah.
Which you wouldn't think that would be the way that a wipe would happen ordinarily.
It's also, as far as I can tell, the first or the earliest known use of actual intertitles to help tell the story.
Yeah. Explosion of a Car had like a little thing at the end of it that didn't really make any sense. But this seems like intertitles that you're used to seeing in silent films, definitely. It's describing the different scenes. It says like scene 1 or like scene 2 where he sees the past, and scene 3 where this happens. So it's not doing dialogue, but it's setting the narrative situation.
There's a really cool thing sort of right in the beginning where Scrooge is getting ready to go to bed in his long shirt and cap.
Yeah.
Where he sort of closes these giant blackout curtains over a window. And the blackout curtains being closed creates a nice dark backdrop for the double exposure ghost to appear. That's
so smart, honestly.
Yeah.
Like, there was some more of that I've been seeing this year from the Brits and from Méliès, is very smart usage of that black space needed for the double exposures. And sometimes, like in this, transforming a scene from a light scene with light coming in through the windows to blackout curtains and then a staging ground for the double exposure effect, which is really, really great.
Up until, I think, 2012, so fairly recently, this was thought to be the oldest surviving Charles Dickens film, or film based on the works of Charles Dickens. Until, in 2012, another film by our old pal George Albert Smith, another Brit, called The Death of Poor Joe was discovered, which is based on a scene from Bleak House, another Charles Dickens story, which I have read, but I do not remember very well.
I remember you reading that book, but
it's
I
very
didn't read
long.
It with you.
It's extremely long. The biggest thing I remember was there's a whole section about spontaneous combustion, because that was a whole thing at the time.
Huh.
But
wouldn't that have been better if poor Joe died by spontaneous combustion?
It would make for maybe a more I don't know, that might be getting into some Michael Bay territory. Because this is kind of a somber, sad film about a child street sweeper who dies in the cold. Very Dickensian.
I suppose so. Yeah.
But it came out a couple months before Scrooge, thereby making it the oldest surviving Charles Dickens film.
Mm-hmm. And Dickens, as well as fairy tales, kind of make sense for fiction that you would have a handle on already before watching a silent film.
Popularly known stories that people are more familiar with. Jumping back into Walter R. Booth's filmography, I also watched An Over-Incubated Baby, which is kind of a wacky sci-fi comedy.
That movie's... Yeah, that movie's quite something. So, there... And this seems to be like turn-of-the-century surgery, like a movie that's kind of skewering science, this new institution of, like,
science.
Medical science.
A little bit, I guess, yeah. I guess it's making fun of the concept of incubating a baby.
Right. It's a comedy, but so the idea is that there is a Professor Bacon's baby incubator, and it says 12 months growth in 1 hour, and so it's a kind of turn of the century huckster kind of situation, and it has a sign that says before on the left. It has a sign that says before use, and it's a picture of a malnourished baby who desperately needs to be incubated. And then on the right side, there's a sign that says after use, and then there's a drawing of a big fat baby with a smug face. A jacked baby.
A baby that's just shredded.
That's a shredded baby. And he's got a smug face, kind of like you saw the... what's that called?
The Enchanted Drawing?
The Enchanted Drawing, yeah. It's a very similar face, where he's just this kind of like...
raised eyebrow.
A baby. Yeah, he's a very, very smarmy baby. And so... and then in the middle is the incubator, and this lady comes up, and she puts her baby in the incubator, and there is, of course, a very quick substitution splice. And she walks away to get, as her photos are developing, or her baby is getting 12 months of growth in 1 hour. There's like a kind of like heater under the incubator.
It's like an oil lamp.
Oh, yeah, I think so. And then the assistant or whoever is kind of tending to the incubator and goofs up and spills everything, and the lightly warm heat turns into a roaring fire underneath the incubator. And he puts the fire out, and when...
When the baby comes out,
yeah,
it's more of a small child with a big beard.
Yeah. So, they super sped the development.
Everyone knows if you over-incubate a baby, it becomes a toddler with a beard.
Yeah, debatably, I wasn't sure if it was blackface, but nobody seemed to say blackface in relation to this. Maybe he's just charred.
It didn't look that way to me. I did not get that impression from it.
Yeah. So yeah, he's like a 7-year-old with a beard.
For a hot second, I thought it might be a baby chimpanzee that they brought out, which would also be a funny gag. I mean, it became a hairy child.
Yeah. Who knew that like fire encourages you to grow hair rather than like burning it off?
It only did in the early 1900s.
That's true. They changed the way that fire works in like a patch in 1905.
Yeah. Robert W. Paul directed another film this year, The Countryman and the Cinematograph.
So important.
Well,
so amazing.
Very meta, this movie.
Yes. I mean, it's important in the sense that like we're keeping our eyes out for like interesting stuff that is happening in these movies. And so this is a country bumpkin who is watching a movie. You see a projected movie on the right side of the frame, and then you see this. I think did they call him a hayseed, or was that a different one? This was British, so
I mean, not in the film.
Yeah.
Part of me even wonders if he's meant to be an American.
That would be funny.
But I don't know. I think Brits have the same sort of prejudices against people from the country being kind of a bit less educated and smart.
He's probably from Wales.
But yeah, kind of
I don't know
country
anybody
bumpkin.
in Wales. I'm not making that assumption.
You heard it here first. Chris hates Welsh people.
Welsh anyway. It's a film within a film, and which is real significant, and also this offers some credence to the idea of people getting scared at that Lumiere screening.
Yeah.
With the arrival of the train, if not because it maybe happened, which there's no primary source to say it did, but we know. I imagine we can tell from this that the idea of somebody being scared by a train coming at them in a movie is in the atmosphere.
Yeah,
because it recreates that in the film. There are two movies that the country bumpkin character is shown, and one of them is a train movie, and he freaks out when it goes toward the camera, which is quite good.
Yeah.
Quite good.
It's like it definitely proves that even if it didn't actually happen at that screening, it was enough of an urban legend at the time for someone else to make a film showing that.
Yeah. And if we're talking about some more Walter R. Booth / Robert W. Paul joints. So there was this movie called The Magic Sword, which I almost skipped over because I thought it would be just a simple trick film. I guess
I did skip over it.
Oh, I mean, it is a trick film, but I think it is like one of the most dense and very trick heavy movies that has a lot of. Yeah, you want to just pause and watch it? Maybe?
Sure.
A few moments later.
Wow. Holy shit. What a film.
Yeah, right?
That's incredible. I loved it.
I think I was... It was one of the last ones that I watched, and I was just kind of taken aback by how confident it is and how well done the tricks are.
Yeah. Not one to miss. And very, like you said, very dense in the amount of effects that it's attempting to do.
Yeah. And like a lot of variants too. A lot of these trick films, they like have one thing that they do, and then they just do that over and over again.
This has a little bit of everything, it feels like.
Yeah. And I think the visuals are really inventive too.
Mm-hmm.
So we just watched it, but we can describe what happens. Is that like a lot of these old movies, the setup is that a guy is attempting to woo a woman, and then basically like a witch appears and conjures like this ghost that is trying to attack him, which is long enough to distract the guy, and the witch tries to steal the princess. He realizes the ruse. He turns around and attacks the witch, and then she just like pieces out
on a broom.
On a broom, which is a really cool effect.
Yeah.
She's standing on the same plane as everybody, and then it just hops to... It's a substitution splice that hops to her being gone and replaced with a double exposure of her on a broom that's in the same place. So she just kind of jumps onto a broom, and then it like moves the double exposure off to like up into the sky, so that it looks like she's flying away, which is really, really good.
Yeah.
But before she goes, she conjures another thing, which is a giant.
Yeah.
Which is using more of this kind of big person double exposure trickery.
But he interacts with the set in a really believable way.
Yeah.
He kind of crawls up over the wall almost, or like peeks up, kind of puts his hands on the wall that they're kind of standing on.
Yeah, they're like on the edge of a castle, basically, and you see the night sky off in the distance. And he reaches up over the edge of the castle and grabs the princess, and then picks her up and carries her away, which is so well done. It's so well done.
Yeah.
I believe what's happening is that like he is a second exposure. Who's much more zoomed in. He's reaching into a zone which they must have, kind of lined it up perfectly so that she is there. With a substitution splice, she is disappeared from the main plane and then appears as like a clump of cloth and stuff, like a miniature version of herself in the guy's hand in the background, and then he picks her up and walks away. It's so good.
The amount of coordination that it must have taken to make this movie is kind of hurting my head, because they might have had to, I'm thinking about it, and they might have had to do that substitution splice of her disappearing, and then go back and do another exposure on that edited film to get the giant in.
Yeah. Which,
I didn't even want to think about that, because if one sprocket of that film breaks going back to the camera, it's all shot. They have to start from scratch.
I mean, and the thing that I think that's done so well in this movie is that it all lines up so well.
Yeah.
A lot of the time these double exposures, they're pretty good, but you can tell that they're not perfectly lined up with the other ones. In the one-man band with Méliès, like the chairs are kind of floating a little bit.
Yeah, there's a little bit. You can tell there's some trickery going on, which you can still hear also, but it is very.
But the fact that they have that precision,
to have stuff for it to kind of believably interact as it does, is very impressive for sure.
And they go to what is it? A kind of fairy, guardian angel type, good fairy, whatever, appears and says, "Hey, I'm going to help you rescue your gal." And then
here's a sword.
That's right. She gives him a magic sword that can defeat the magic beings. They go to the witch's cave.
Yeah.
And then there's just all sorts of just kind of combat-y back and forth.
The witch disguises the princess as the witch and disguises herself as the princess. They look like they're swapped. And then the guy shows up, a sort of flying demon head comes out of the cauldron and flies around a bit.
Yeah, it's so cool. It's like a head against the black background of the cave with little flappy wings that are just flying around in circles.
There's the cauldron turns into the giant's head, which then turns into a giant skull, I think, after the guy stabs it. There's a bit where you think that he's stabbed the princess, but then they swap. I just watched it. I'm forgetting exactly how that gag worked. But there's a bit where he stabs someone and it switches, and you think that it's like he stabbed the wrong person.
And there's a point where he thinks that the witch is dead, and he's walking off with the princess, and the witch is about to stab him from behind
with the sword. Yeah,
and then the good fairy appears at the last second and then saves the guy by turning the witch into a carpet. And then she takes she turns the witch into a carpet. Witch is defeated. She unrolls the carpet. They get onto the carpet and then fly away. And as they fly away, the entire witch cave crumbles and falls down.
The entire witch cave straight up explodes. and collapses on itself. It's incredible.
And then they have a little happy ending shot where the two of them and their friends and the good fairy have a dinner and party.
Yeah. I mean, this. I was a little blown away by this movie. This is a lot. I mean, Méliès is doing a lot of stuff, but this is honestly like rivaling him in terms of its the amount of effects it's trying to pack into one movie. Yeah, and how well they're being pulled off.
Yeah, I mean, Méliès has developed... I think we can determine, based on these other people doing trick films, and a trick film like this, is that Méliès has found a style, and he may be kind of sticking to it. We'll see how that goes. But it seems like he mainly sticks to a certain style, where these people are starting later and creating their own styles that in some ways are more modern visual storytelling than Méliès does.
They're definitely kind of like, sitting on Méliès' shoulders a bit. Like Méliès is doing has done a lot of the kind of groundwork needed for these other people to even attempt what they're trying to do. But yeah, it is sort of, you're seeing, while Méliès is kind of very much sticking to relatively the same kind of things that he's been doing the last few years, other people are kind of taking those things and running with them a little bit further than he is.
So speaking of formal experimentation, there's another Brit that's going around named James Williamson.
Yeah.
And he did this movie called The Big Swallow, which is very, very surreal, honestly.
It is, true.
It is, so the movie is silent with, there are a couple different versions on YouTube. There's one that's just with music, like most of these, but there's one that has a description that is from the marketing materials that came with the movie.
Oh, interesting.
Which is talking about like some supposed dialogue that would be in the scene. So it's just a medium shot of a guy against a background. And the supposed dialogue is, I won't, I'll eat the camera first. Because it seems like he really doesn't want his picture taken like one of those like kinds of kids that just freaks out when you point a camera at them.
Excuse me.
Was that you? I don't remember.
I definitely relate to that impulse, if nothing else.
Do you relate to the impulse of wanting to eat a camera rather than...
I mean, maybe when I was a child, yes, but not lately.
So, he seems like he doesn't want his picture taken, and he kind of gets closer and closer to the camera. The camera zooms in and in and in and in and in, and then it zooms in on his face and then his mouth, and it kind of refocuses so that you can see his mouth in such like extreme detail. You see all the pores and everything, and then he opens his mouth, and then it zooms further into the blackness of his mouth, and he consumes the camera. He has eaten the camera.
Well, to the point that we then see a camera and cameraman fall into the darkness.
Into the void of this man's maw.
And then he retreats, having swallowed the camera.
Yeah, and he goes like, ooh, yes, very good.
Yeah.
Tasty.
Yeah, I guess this means that James Williamson invented vor.
Yeah, wow, father of vor. We really are going on the explicit one on this episode. Yeah, but this is like, I mean, this is... There's a lot of silliness that's happening in these early movies, but this one is another level of like strange silliness that is happening, I think. And it's also like the Countryman, the Cinematograph pretty meta as well.
Yeah.
Because it starts out from the perspective of the camera, and then zooms back out from outside of that camera, because you see the camera and the cameraman tumble into the abyss. So it's got like a kind of combination of like literal in-scene camera and non-diegetic quote-unquote camera, you know?
Yeah, just like audience point of view outside of... Yeah, it's very... You can't really think about it too hard because then your head will start to hurt. But it does feel like more and more movies are kind of starting to acknowledge a little bit of like what cinema is, or like what kind of goes into it. Like, you know, we see in this, like, we see a cameraman sort of appear. Like, we've seen cameramen on film before, but this is sort of explicitly acknowledging, like, yeah, there's a guy filming this right now.
I think it might be a photograph camera that has like the hood over it and everything.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I'm not sure. It only goes by in a flash.
Yeah.
Really.
Right. I guess that would make it slightly less meta.
Yeah,
so
you're right.
It would make the sort of film point of view totally separate.
Yeah, let's call it a film camera. That's more interesting.
But Williamson is doing a lot of interesting stuff this year.
Yeah.
He's making some good movies. And I think he didn't start this year, but he hadn't really done anything notable up until this point.
Well, he did Attack on a China Mission.
Oh, that's right, he did. So yeah. he's continuing that trend then. He's doing more kind of, I mean, not really with The Big Swallow, but with his other movies, kind of his more kind of grounded sort of multiple scene dramas.
Yeah. Although before we go to that, I will say that before we leave the concept of meta-ness, metatextuality, sorry, that some other Brits that are in the zone right now are Mitchell and Kenyon, who are some sort of taking up the mantle of Actualities from the Lumieres. Mm-hmm. They're just filming a lot of street scenes and that kind of thing. But one kind of big difference is that in Lumiere movies, the camera is they're cinema verite. Like, the camera is not often acknowledged, and it's supposed to be just documenting an event. But in basically every Mitchell and Kenyon actuality, the people were actually encouraged to just stand at the camera and stare at it. And there's always, like, in all of their documentaries of street scenes, the lower third of the screen is taken up by children, street urchins, one BBC person called them.
I mean, what else are you going to call them? They are classical street urchins to a T.
Yeah. And they're just, like, smiling and looking at the camera and, like, talking to each other and having a good old time, which apparently they actually encouraged, because part of Mitchell and Kenyon's whole thing was shooting movies in the day, developing them, and then showing them to that community later that night so they could see themselves on film. And so that was part of the appeal of it. But anyway, back to James Williamson.
I mean, I got more to say about Mitchell and Kenyon if you want to stay on them for a bit.
Sure.
I mean, one thing about their movies is a lot of them are on YouTube, on the BFI, British Film Institute YouTube channel. Mm-hmm. And they have voiceover, like a contemporary voiceover, just kind of giving context for each one, which is super interesting and really kind of makes them a lot more interesting to watch, because you're getting all of the kind of contextual information as to why, you know, like what they're depicting, or sort of what kind of the backstory is with Mitchell and Kenyon and how they got started, or all different things like that. So very, very educational. They reminded me a lot of kind of like portraits more than, I feel like if like Lumiere films, art to photographs are like, are landscape. Like, they're very sort of like, here's a place. Whereas Mitchell and Kenyon films feel very much like portraits. They're like, here are these people. And they're just kind of staring right into the lens. And kind of interacting with each other, and like kind of, they're interacting with the camera a little bit more.
It feels more real. It feels more like actual life in a way.
You really get a sense of like the personalities of the people on screen in these. A lot of them are like working class British people from different cities and towns, and they just have so much character. Like the street urchins that we just mentioned. I mean, there's one that he's got like his thumbs kind of hooked into a waistcoat. And he's got his little hat.
How iconic!
He's got his little hat, and he's kind of posing for the camera a little bit. And you see all these other kids kind of running around and like looking at the camera and then moving on, and he's just there, just posing with his thumbs in his waistcoat. And this kid is like, I don't know, 9 years old. It's great. This kid is clearly very very streetwise. I get the sense. This kid is running around picking pockets. And there's just like, there's dock workers, there's like people coming off of ships, there's all kinds of stuff. But you really get a lot of personality from them, I think.
Yeah, I only watched a couple of these because they are, a lot of them, very similar.
Yeah.
They're just people walking in front of the camera and mugging for the camera. But the commentary does add a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And so I do want to go back at some point and just, I know there's like a DVD that is probably only available in England, that is the complete, oh my god, I was going to say Mitchell and Webb, Mitchell and Kenyon, the complete like Mitchell and Kenyon collection that I think these descriptions and stuff are from.
Yeah.
That'd be really cool DVD to look through,
Yeah.
I'd like to sit down and watch all of this stuff, but not really when I'm in like a cinema mood,
Yeah.
It's just historically very interesting.
According to sourced Wikipedia, Mitchell and Kenyon have the largest like surviving library of actuality films, which is pretty cool. But getting back to narrative stuff, James Williamson also made a film called Fire! Exclamation point.
Yeah, and this is another in that group of 5-minute or so movies that just like blow my mind as far as technical composition prowess and editing prowess.
This one is very, very ambitious, very slickly made, but in a very different way than we're seeing from George Méliès. Like, it's not super big on effects or anything. It's much more about kind of staging and editing.
Yeah.
And it's much more grounded. It's using a lot more kind of... All of Méliès's movies use these kind of elaborate painted backdrops and sets. Whereas this is, I think, only shot with maybe one real set. The rest of the time it's kind of using real locations, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, I know. So it's a firefighting movie, which was a genre back then. But it's got like so the main set is a house that's catching on fire, and it's actually the same house that he used to shoot Attack on a China Mission.
Just an abandoned house.
Yes, somewhere in England.
Yeah.
And I was just so impressed by this movie, and honestly, like, really engaged. I thought the soundtrack helped with that a lot. It made me really think about how important the soundtrack is in a lot of these movies that sometimes we're just missing. Because they're being played completely silently. Because I think that... But anyway, when I watched this, I was... I wasn't ever, like, concerned for the people who were in the fire, but I was swept up in it, honestly.
Yeah.
It's got a lot of energy to it. And, it's interesting that you make that Méliès comparison, because of all of the more complex movies that we've seen, this one really isn't big on effects at all, and it is just storytelling. And drama, honestly. So basically what happens is there's a house that catches on fire. There's a guy that sees it and runs to the fire station. They get the equipment ready. You see like different scenes for each of these things, basically. They get the equipment ready. They put it all up on their horse and buggies. Then a shot outside where they ride the horses from the firehouse to the burning house. It cuts from that inside of the house, so where you see a guy who lives there trying to deal with the fire in his room. And
which is just a real fire that's around him.
Yeah. And he passes out from the smoke inhalation, and you think like, oh my god, oh no, you know? And then there's a window in the back of his room, and then you just see the window get busted through, and there's a firefighter on a ladder who comes in with a hose and puts out some of the fire and picks him up and brings him out of the window. And then it cuts to outside of the window where he's coming down the ladder, and the firefighter brings him down the ladder, and they do various other firefightery things in this outside scene. They spray water, and there are other people who flee the building, and there's one person who jumps out of that same window after they have set up a blanket for him to fall on and all held it up in that classic way.
Right, which is just a real stunt. It's just a single shot of them getting a blanket out, pulling it taut, and a guy jumping out of a second or third story window and landing in it.
Which, I mean, I guess it's... Maybe they used real equipment. Maybe they worked with the fire department, like modern movies have cozy contracts with the military to be able to use all their equipment.
I mean, I feel like they probably did. There's definitely a sense of kind of authenticity to this, of like...
Yeah.
The big, fire carriage, horse-drawn fire carriage rolling down the street, and all the hoses and ladders and stuff. I mean, all of the sort of spectacle this movie's done in camera. Like, we see kind of smoke pouring out of the house from outside. We see, the guy jumping out the window. Like, it's a pretty... It feels very impressive and very... not fantastical, but definitely kind of just big and exciting.
Yeah.
But it's all practical stuff, which is pretty cool. And I think it's maybe the first real instance of something I think we're going to start seeing a lot more of as we go on, which is like big, elaborate, crazy stunt work. I know definitely once we get into the 1910s and 1920s, that's going to be a much bigger deal.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that this film's shyness away from the special effects and more interest in more of the practical goings-on in front of the camera makes it feel like probably the most realistic drama that I've seen so far.
Yeah.
There were effective parts about the criminal movie, the Zecca criminal movie, but this one just feels so real, you know?
Parts of it even feel like kind of a almost like a bringing together the actuality genre and the sort of spectacle narrative genre.
Right.
Because when we see the firemen getting ready at the fire station and sort of rushing to the scene, it's all, I assume, real firefighters, as opposed to actors, because it's all done on an actual street. There's no set for that.
Right.
I imagine
shot
that
on location.
I imagine they just went to a firehouse and was like, "Hey, there's no fires right now. Do you mind just like doing your thing, so we can film it and make a moving picture about it?"
And they said, moving pictures?
Yeah. You said what? And so, yeah, it feels like it has that sort of groundedness and that realism that we get from the documentary actuality movies. In addition to the kind of spectacular narrative stuff.
Yeah. I like their hats, too.
The hats cool stuck out to me, like chromed Legionnaire helmets.
Yeah, they looked almost Spartan-y.
Yeah, I did not realize that old English firefighters wore big chrome helmets like that. But they look nice. They look great on camera, let me tell you. There were a couple others from Williamson that were pretty cool, but definitely not quite as impressive as that one.
Yeah. I guess, Stop Thief was a nice chase movie, but it was and it had some, like, kind of continuous action between shots.
Yeah.
Although it did seem a little, it hadn't figured out the whole...
Screen direction?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I have that in my notes. They hadn't really figured out that when someone's running one direction on screen and we cut to another angle, they should be running the same direction. That stuff's all messed up, but they tried. They hadn't figured it out yet. And I appreciate the effort.
It's a slight movie that feels like some more simplistic movies, but because it has so many different scenes in it where they're running through, I think it's a little notable.
Yeah, it feels like the first real kind of like chase I've seen in a film, as opposed to like someone just kind of running across the screen and then getting caught, like the sprinkler sprinkled or something. Like this is kind of different scenes that are happening during a chase, which is very fun.
Would you like to move on to the Americans?
I suppose the Americans. We can talk about them too.
The consistently most boring
I have
of all.
Little to no notes about the American films that I watched for 1901. So I think we can probably run through them pretty quick.
Blaze right through it, sure. Well, the main guy in America right now is Edwin S Porter. He's working for Edison. He's going to be, his most notable movie is going to be coming out in 2 years, which is The Great Train Robbery. But right now he's working up his chops, making a lot of movies for the Edison Company. And he was, prior to making movies, a projectionist like me.
Ooh.
He was actually a projectionist at this place on West 23rd Street called Eden Musée.
Oh.
And it was a place that had wax figures, and it was one of the earlier motion picture houses, and it had, this is just, all that the description says, a chamber of horrors in the basement.
Oh, boy.
So at the Eden Musée, he showed Edison films, and he arranged programs for them, and eventually he started working for Edison. And he, at some point later, was actually put in charge of Edison's movie company. But he made a couple little movies this year. Do you have any that stands out to you?
Not really. I mean, the main thing that stood out about the Edwin S Porter movies I watched were kind of how simplistic they were. They feel like kind of little novelty acts, as opposed to what the Brits and the French are doing. Like,
I mean, especially with some of this more complex stuff that's happening.
They feel like movies that kind of you would watch in a whatchamacallit? Is it Zoetrope?
The Mutoscope?
Yes, Mutoscope, excuse me. Like single scenes, just kind of like, look at this.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I wasn't really feeling them. I watched a few, but honestly none really stuck out to me.
Yeah. One kind of notable one is Kansas Saloon Smashers.
True. Kansas Saloon Smashers is probably the most notable one.
Which we talked in the news segment last week about Carrie Nation, who was a big figure in the temperance movement, in the growing temperance movement. And that year, she had kind of made a name for herself by going through a bunch of saloons and just destroying them because she thought that drinking was evil. Edwin S. Porter, along with Edison, made a couple of movies that kind of mock her because they don't like her point of view, I guess.
Hey, we like alcohol.
Yeah. It's a little less evident in Kansas Saloon Smashers than the follow-up movie, which is called Why Mr. Nation Wants a Divorce.
That one's a little less subtle, I would say.
Yeah. So Kansas Saloon Smashers, like you were saying, very simple movie. It's a locked-off shot of a bar. A few people are drinking at the bar and having a good time. It has a joke, I guess. This didn't scan to me in the 21st century, but a stereotypically Irish man who just looked to me like a guy with a top hat. But he walked up.
One of those stereotypical Irishmen with the top hat.
I guess he walked up to the bar. The joke is that he walked up to the bar instead of with a glass. He walked up with a bucket and asked them to fill the bucket with beer. Anyway, that happens for about 40 seconds of the minute, and then 40 seconds in, Carrie Nation bursts in with her group of temperance people, and they just run behind the bar and start smashing all the bottles.
Carrie Nation has an axe in this movie, which is pretty rad. Honestly, for a movie meant to mock Carrie Nation, it makes her kind of like this intense, scary, powerful figure where she just busts into a saloon and destroys it with a hatchet. Not an axe, a hatchet. And I don't know. It's at least entertaining, I guess, in that sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, she smashes that saloon.
True to the name.
Yeah.
And Why Mr. Nation Wants a Divorce is a movie that shows her, while she's off doing her temperance stuff, her stay-at-home husband, I guess, puts the troublesome kids to sleep, and and it's basically saying that I think it's probably implying that she shouldn't be out of the house and that she should be doing this stuff. But he is so overwhelmed from dealing with the unruly children that he takes a swig of alcohol, and just as he does, his wife comes in and gets mad at him, and comes in the door, and one of the kids was misbehaving, and so he has to spank the kid, and so in a kind of twist at the end of it, his wife sees him drinking alcohol, and so she spanks him and then puts him to bed. Another interesting Edwin S. Porter movie was Execution of... Oh man, how do you say his name? Leon...
Oh, Chogas?
Chogas, yeah. Execution of Leon Chogas with Panorama of Auburn Prison. Did you watch this one?
I did not, no.
It's pretty simple. So as we mentioned in the news segment, the president was assassinated this year, and Edwin S. Porter, wanted to film the execution, but the prison said he could not do that. And so he just filmed the panorama outside of the prison and then recreated the execution in a fairly realistic way on set. So it's a panorama, and then you see the guy that kind of looks like him getting pulled up, walked up to an electric chair, and then they strap him in, and then his body pulses 3 times with electricity, and then he's dead.
Yikes.
And yeah, I think a lot of the people watching this on YouTube with the 5 million views, which is a lot for something like this, think that it's an actual execution. It could have been, but it's not.
If Méliès had made it, he would have been a ghost and like danced around afterwards.
Really goes to show his style in this situation, his sense of style. And did you see the Pan American Exposition by night?
Maybe.
I'm
sorry. I have
the Americans are.
I'm
boring.
sorry. I have so little enthusiasm for all the Porter movies this year, but
I get you.
I mean, all the ones I watched, I mean, seemed pretty samey. I mean, Kansas Saloon Smashers did kind of stick out in that it was kind of commenting on current events, which I thought was interesting. But yeah, they just seem so much less ambitious and kind of impressive to me.
Fair enough. Let's skip him. The last movie that I have on here is another American movie, but it's Frederick S. Armitage, who is another rising director, and he made this one for American Mutoscope and Biograph Company, and it's notable in that it is the first time lapse.
This I did.
It's called The Demolishing and Building Up of the Star Theater, and it is really just it's a shot from about a block away of a stage theater, I believe, that is being demolished, and it takes probably a week and a half or something like that, judging by how many times the sun goes around, and it's pretty neat because you see that classic time lapse of cars and people streaking as they move through the street in the time lapse motion. But yeah, they just take the building apart layer by layer from the top down, and then it's a building construction site. But it's neat.
It is.
And there's a part where a caterpillar gets stuck on the lens for a few seconds.
It is very neat, and it's also something like time lapses for whatever reason are something I very much associate with like the 90s. I don't know why. But it's very cool seeing a time lapse from 1901 because it is such a just like formally not really something I'm used to seeing from old film like this.
Right. Yeah. But yeah, American's boring.
Yeah, I think that about does it. Pretty eventful, pretty fun year of film.
Yeah.
And next episode is
boy.
going to be a real doozy. I'm excited.
Oh boy. Yeah. I've got a Blu-ray actually.
Oh, damn. I don't.
I took it from work.
I'm sure I can get a nice HD YouTube of it somewhere.
What's your favorite movie of this year, Glenn?
Good question. You know what? I would have probably said Bluebeard. But you know what? The Magic Sword was my favorite. The Magic Sword really was a great time.
Yeah. I have a hard time picking between Fire and The Magic Sword.
Fire is also very good.
Two very opposite directions. I was really impressed with all of these 5-minute long complex narratives. I don't know. I'll say Fire since you said Magic Sword.
Very good.
Well, that's about it for this long episode. Gross. Let's wrap it up.
We can cut out the several minutes of me just watching Magic Sword.
Yeah. So that's it. Again, I forgot to mention at the top of the show that there's a YouTube playlist you can watch with all of the movies that we just talked about.
It's just a thing that you say at the end of the show. It's fine.
No, but it's like important because you might want to watch along, you know?
Oh, true. Well.
Oops. Anyway, there's a YouTube playlist. We have a Twitter that we don't use, and you can watch along with us. Send us your movie suggestions if you want, but we know what we're going to watch next week. Talk to you later. Bye.
Bye-bye.
They'll laugh at us and call us all buffoons. Put away on my balloon boy. You're gonna be a star, my sweet balloon.